Hi everybody, my name's Aaliyah and welcome to my channel, Aaliyah Uncharted. Today I'm going to go over the books that I read for the month of April 2020, which was also the month for the OWLS Magical Readathon, which I impressed myself and actually succeeded in this year, which is pretty amazing. So I'm going to start by going over the books that I read, and then at the end I'll go over the challenges that I completed and the career that I'm set up to achieve by the end of the year. So that's exciting. But first, the books. Okay, so the first book that I finished in April is The Power by Naomi Alderman. This I started in March and then finished in the first couple days of April, and this was a whole 5 stars. This is one of the most interesting and thought-provoking and supremely uncomfortable books I have read in a really long time. And pretty much as soon as I finished it, I had to throw it in the hands of anybody in my life who likes to read books, and then even those who don't like to read books. I need people to talk about this with me. So let's talk about what this is about. This is about our world. All of a sudden, all of the females of the world get the ability to manipulate electricity just in their bodies. So they get the power to electrocute and manifest electricity through their hands, and it really turns all of society upside down. I just found this fascinating. So good, and again, supremely uncomfortable because it really makes you take a hard look at things if gender norms were totally flipped and what that would look like realistically, and what the consequences of that would be. So I think I might do a full review on this because I have a lot of thoughts and I'm trying to keep it succinct here, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. So I'm going to probably do a whole dedicated video for this. So good, 5 out of 5 stars. Would recommend, if nothing else, than for a book club because, again, there are so many thoughts. Okay, so the next 2 books that I read in April were Junkie, or #Junkie, not sure which one, and its sequel Rev by Cambria Hebert. This is technically part of a sequel or a companion series to another series written by that author, but you can read it independently. These you can totally read without all of that context. So these books follow our 2 boys, Drew and Trent. Trent is a senior in college, trying to figure out what he wants to do after college, and Drew recently graduated the year previously. He has a really boring IT desk job that he really doesn't like, and his real passion is racing cars. So he is an independent race car driver, and that's what he wants to do with his life. So these 2 books follow Drew and Trent as they move forward, but also it's really focused on their friends to lovers romance. And this was just so sweet. They really emphasize the bond that they have as friends, how they've built a really strong relationship, just a strong platonic relationship first. And it was just so nice. And I will admit, they did get pretty cheesy, and they do get a little graphic if you're not into that kind of thing, but it was just so heartwarming and sweet, and not without its speed bumps, obviously. Ooh, no pun intended, but I like it. Overall, it was just such a nice read, and I really enjoyed both of our characters. I listened to this on audio, and the audiobook actually has 2 narrators for each of our protagonists, which was nice, so you could keep track of them a little bit easier and really hear their voice. Gave both of these books 4 stars. Would recommend if you're looking for just a really nice, light male-male romance that, you know, you don't need to think too hard about, but just it gives you all the nice warm and fuzzies. So yes, would recommend. Alright, so the next book that I read in April was Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. This, I'm guessing most of you have at least heard of this by now. This made huge waves when it first came out in 2012, 2013, something like that. And it has created a whole community, a huge following since then. This is a nonfiction book by Sheryl Sandberg, who works for Facebook, or did work for Facebook, and has worked in other high-ranking positions with other tech companies like Google. And this is essentially her collection of research and observations about women in the workplace, specifically the limitations placed on women both by society and by themselves. For better or for worse, I think that this book is a little outdated. And actually, I consider that a good thing. I think that this has been a foundational piece to really start a conversation about women in the workplace and on how women can fully take advantage of all of their skills without having to compromise. I think it's just being a 26-year-old who had the privilege and opportunity to be able to take classes on gender in college and to be the beneficiary of a lot of conversations sparked by this. This didn't have as much of an impact on me. This wasn't groundbreaking information because I've heard it before. Overall, as a book, I think that it's fine. No real new information for me, so I gave this 3 stars, but I also can't ignore the just overall impact this has had. So I think if you haven't heard a lot of those conversations or haven't really looked into a lot of this stuff, this would be a really good starting point. So the next book that I read in April was The Storied Life of A.J. Fikri by Gabrielle. This is a quaint little book set on an island off of Maine, somewhere on the East Coast, and our main character, A.J. Fikri, he is grumpy. He is a bookseller. He is grieving a loss, and he just got robbed, and he's just really not having a really great time. And he gets to his bookstore, and there is a child there. There is a child left behind in his bookstore, just with a note saying, "Hey, I can't take care of her. I want her to be a reader. So if you could help me out, that'd be great, thanks." He finds himself in a situation where he has to figure out what to do with this little girl that was left behind in his bookstore. And this book goes over about 15 years, so they're all little snapshots of life on this island with AJ, and I think that this was cute. If you're looking for something really light, go for it. I think that this is nothing special, to be honest. This didn't have a whole lot going for me, but I don't think it's bad. I think it's just pretty average, and sometimes you just want a pretty average, fluffy book, and you'd get that here. So, yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. It was cute. That's about it. Okay, the next book that I read in April was Wolf Song by TJ Klune, and if you can't tell by the look on my face, I loved this. This was originally pitched as just gay werewolves, which was all I needed to start reading this. This follows our boy named Ox, and he doesn't think very highly of himself. He's essentially been told that he's not going to amount to anything, and he believes it, and it's really unfortunate. He gets some new neighbors called the Bennetts, and he nearly immediately gets adopted by them. And the book follows his development as he starts to gain confidence through his association with them and learn how to see his own worth, and then also feel a sense of belonging with this family that he didn't know he needed. Of course, the Bennetts end up being werewolves, which is a whole other part of the story, and a kind of werewolf mythos that goes on in here is really interesting, and it's something I haven't seen before. So like that was really fun. But this really is truly a story about Ox and how he figures out what he's worth and that he's worth something. The really cool thing about this is it's actually written in a way where you can see that development happening. This is written in the first person, and the writing style changes as his development goes on, which is really, really cool to see, because you could just tell that he was a lot more self-assured later on in the book just based on how it was written. I really enjoyed how that was done. Also, it is still super gay, but that's not a huge part of the story, but it was still a great part of the story, and I really enjoyed his relationship. But overall, this really is a story about Ox, and I loved him, and I loved this. 5 out of 5 stars. Would recommend. The next book I read in April was Opal by Maggie Stiefvater. This is a novella that follows the Raven Cycle series, so this happens maybe not like directly after, but like after the events of the Raven King. So I really can't say a whole lot about this because it's entirely spoilers. This is kind of a bridge between the Raven Cycle series and then the Dreamer trilogy, the first being Call Down the Hawk. But it follows Opal, who's a really interesting character to follow. She's not entirely human, and she has a really interesting perspective. This really is about laying groundwork for the Dreamer trilogy, but also getting a glimpse at some of our characters from the Raven Cycle and how they're doing. That's about all I can say. I thought this was fun. It was really great to just read about some of our boys from the Raven Cycle. This was a reread. I read it when it first came out, but I wanted to read it again before I started reading Call Down the Hawk. So yeah, not really a whole lot can be said. I really enjoy it though. I love Maggie Stiefvater's writing. 4 out of 5 stars. I just like it. I just like everything about this. The next thing I read in April was Moonstruck by Grace Ellis. This is a really short, cute little graphic novel about a werewolf girl who is a barista. She has a new girlfriend who is also a werewolf. Gay werewolves did not do that on purpose. Anyway, she has this new girlfriend. There are a lot of magical hijinks that ensue. Again, this is a short graphic novel, so I don't want to say too much about it, but I will say that we've got a really good cast of characters here. The art style is really cute, and I really liked the color palette of this. I also really enjoyed the really large diversity that we have in this. There's people of all shapes and sizes, different mythological creatures, different sexual orientations and gender expressions and races and ethnicities and all that stuff, and everything is normalized, so I really enjoyed that. It was just a really nice, fun, magical story, and it was really cute. I will say I wish we had gotten a little bit more insight into our main character, Julie. I'm hoping that the second volume will give us a little bit more insight into her character and why she does some things that she does. But for now, I thought it was just a really cute first volume, and I'll probably be taking a look at the second one at least sometime soon. So I gave that one 3 stars. It was fun. And finally, we're at the end. Like most of my wrap-ups are not going to be this long because I don't normally read this many books in a single month. My last book is Searcy by Madeline Miller. I've been really intrigued by this for a while because everybody's been shouting Madeline Miller's praises, especially with The Song of Achilles, which I have not read, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking about Searcy. Searcy is a retelling, reimagining of the story of Searcy. Searcy is a witch of an island visited by Odysseus during the Odyssey. She's the one who turns all the men into pigs. And so this is kind of a reimagining of her story, but not just that story, her entire story. This looks at her origins, where she comes from, and also how she gets to her island, and then why she does the things that she does, and how her magic manifests, all of this stuff. You could tell that this was written by a deity. Like, it felt very distant almost in the way of an immortal person, but I thought it was done well. I think the audiobook narrator did a good job on that one. As for the story, I thought it was really interesting. I think that the first part of the book was definitely a bit slow. It took a bit to get into, especially with a bunch of names being thrown around right off the bat, but as soon as she gets to the island, I think that's when it starts to pick up a bit more, and slowly but surely you get to know Searcy as an actual character. I think because of the way that it was written, it was hard to connect to Searcy as a character at the beginning because she seemed so distant, but she seems to be a bit more, maybe not human, but at least a little bit more relatable as the story goes on. Especially once you see some familiar characters like Daedalus and then, of course, obviously Odysseus. I thought it was really interesting to see her perspective on a lot of things, and then I was really interested to see the after I really liked how Madeline Miller wrote her story of after, what happened after that, what were her choices, how did her visit with Odysseus impact the rest of her life. Overall, I think it did a really good job at giving Searcy a bit more agency than you see her have in the original text of the Odyssey, which I thought was really good. There's definitely a lot of growth that she goes through, both emotionally and in terms of her power, which I really liked. Anyway, I think it was a really interesting retelling and a cool reimagining of her story. So I would recommend it. I gave it like a 3.5 stars. It was really interesting when I look back at it, but when I was in the middle of reading it, I wasn't necessarily super engaged until we got to like the last third of the book. And so I can't give it a super high rating since it was so slow at the beginning. But I think overall it was a really good story, and I would recommend giving it a go because I think it deserves its praise, even if the beginning wasn't for me. Okay, so that's it. That's everything I read in April. This is not typical for me. I do not normally read this many books in a month, but the OWLS Readathon was definitely a huge motivator to get all of these books read, so I'm actually very proud of myself. So I'm really quick going to go over the challenges and such for the OWLS Readathon that I completed. The career I was going for was to be a worker for the Ministry of Magic, specifically in the Department of International Magical Cooperation, mainly because that's the closest thing to my job in real life, so I figured I may as well go for it. So this actually required 6 books, and I hit all 6 of them. So I'm really, really proud of myself, and I'm really glad that I got all of this done. Charms was a book with a white cover, so that was Lean In. Defense Against the Dark Arts was a book set at the coast or at sea, and that would be Story Life of A.J. Fikri, because it's on an island. History of Magic was a book featuring witches or wizards, so that would be Searcy, since she is a witch. Muggle Studies, a contemporary, I used #junkie. Potions, a book under 150 pages, I used Opal. And Transfiguration, a book featuring shapeshifting, obviously my favorite, gay werewolves from Wolfsong. So yeah, that was my OWLS, and I'm really excited that I'm going to be able to go, I don't know why I'm still holding this, but anyway, I'm really excited I'm going to be able to still try to go for all of them once the newts come about in August. So that's really exciting. Whew. That was a lot of books. I do not normally read this much in a month, so this is definitely an outlier for me, but I'm also really proud of myself, so that's great. Good job, Aaliyah. That being said, my voice hurts, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much for sticking around this long and for stopping by, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye! The books.